Medicine, what we gon' do? Got too many dreams that gotta come true.
Oh yeah, and I have a music video out for I Killed My Clone that just dropped today. So if you're watching this, then it's available now on my YouTube channel, so go watch it, enjoy, thank you! So if you're familiar with my channel, then you probably know that I've talked a lot about teenagers and the shift in the teen experience and the development of teenagers in the context of social media. Teenagers are exposed to a lot nowadays and seem to be under a lot of pressure to grow up fast and almost like compete with adults. It just seems like the gap between childhood and adulthood becomes more and more narrow with each day. I actually came up with today's video idea when I was looking into the sexy red and respectability politics discourse going on. So if you're interested in watching this bonus video, then you can go to my Patreon, patreon.com/MadisonBrown for bonus content and early access to videos. Thanks! Social media plays a big part in this, but I've also noticed that there is a huge decline in teen spaces, teen-oriented spaces, teen-oriented media, fashion, and just general youth culture. The internet has really changed the way that teenagers find community and identity. Stores like Justice, Hollister, Aeropostale, malls in general, which also serve as a third space, have gone almost extinct with the rise of online shopping, Amazon, and online fashion trends that stem from TikTok. There's been a huge shift in the way that teenagers dress and how they communicate with each other, which I think has led to the decline of teenhood and tweenhood. There aren't too many teen-oriented spaces where teenagers can just be themselves and be their age and develop in an organic way that isn't directly tied to internet and social media culture. So today I really want to dive into the death of teenhood and tweenhood and why that is. Today I want to celebrate 2 sweet years of Love and Pies with You, a super cute mobile game that's also available for tablets. The game follows the main protagonist, Amelia, who owns her own cafe where you can bake pies and cakes and expand the business and find romance along the way. Right now is the best time to download the app because they're celebrating the 2-year anniversary, so there's a bunch of birthday benefits going on in the next 2 weeks. There's new events, new storylines, and so many great rewards. You actually get an exclusive in-game decoration item for free if you play the game in the next couple of weeks. You can join the Bake Out Bash on Love and Pies Instagram and Facebook accounts and stand a chance to win some great prizes. Join the mouth-watering celebration today and install Love and Pies. Sometimes if I'm on the train, since I am a New Yorker, I'll just play this game when I'm bored and I have a long commute somewhere. So download Love and Pies today to join all the anniversary fun and make sure to grab your free decoration item before the end of the month. I'm so excited to play with you. Thank you, Love and Pies, for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to our scheduled programming. So first we have to talk about the origins of teenhood, because being a teenager was not a thing up until the 1940s. So the term teenager was first introduced to the American public in the 1940s as a moniker coined by advertising executives looking to sell their products to a new audience. So it's interesting that the origins of teenhood was essentially made up by companies to create a new demographic to sell things to. This creature is a mid-20th century phenomenon, and almost everything has changed since the early 1940s when it emerged. Are teenagers still necessary? And that's a really important question, which I think has really shaped this video, is like, what is the purpose of the teenager? What is a teenager today, and how has it changed from the original definition of a teenager? Because the teenager is really just a product of consumerism. But there, at a time, was such a rich culture around adolescence and teenhood. And I want to differentiate the difference between teenhood and adolescence, because the teenager is marked as the emancipation of adolescence. I explained this poorly, but basically an adolescent is someone who's going through puberty, experiencing puberty. You could be 10 years old, 12 years old in your adolescence and into your teen years, but a teenager is specifically someone who is 13 to 19. And like I'm talking about in this video, a teenager is essentially a construct created by consumerism. So in this video, we're really questioning teenagehood, the purpose of it, not adolescence itself. Being a teenager is, he said, a false identity meant to short-circuit the quest for a real one. By giving people superficial roles to play, advertising, the mass media, and even the schools confuse young people and leave them dissatisfied and thus open to sales pitches that promise a deepening of identity. You're a teenager, you'll like this. If you're within this age group, then you should buy this. But the origins of the teenager started in the 1940s and was a result of a few things. One being the Great Depression and the workforce and how it was affected by the Great Depression. Because there was an increase in restrictions on child labor that had happened a few years prior during the 1930s. What was different was that after 1933, when Franklin D. Roosevelt took office, virtually all young people were thrown out of work as a part of public policy to reserve jobs for men trying to support families. Businesses could actually be fined if they kept childless young people on their payrolls. And because children were working less, they had a lot of time on their hands. So what would they do during the day? They went to school. And this is when high schools started to become a lot more popular and more kids were attending school full time. Despite high schools being around for about 100 years prior, the first high school that had opened was in 1821 in Boston. And so once attending high school became more popular and normalized in day-to-day life for young people, of course this created communal space for people of the same age to socialize, and this started to build the foundation of teen identity and teen culture. As a result, a larger number of teenagers were thrown into a common space than ever before. It was only natural that discussions about commonalities would occur. Before long, schools developed their own cultural patterns completely unlike the childhood or adult experience. School athletics and extracurricular activities only enhanced this nascent culture. The American teenager was born. And lastly, the automobile actually had a lot to do with the emergence of teenhood and teen culture. Since the invention of the automobile, buses became a thing, and buses allowed for larger groups of people to be transported from point A to point B, and so more kids were able to go to school because of this transportation, and groups of kids from different areas were able to come together and go to schools that were larger than like a small local schoolhouse for like a handful of children, which was the norm before. Teenagers being able to drive allowed them a lot more freedom, and they could, go on dates, and courtship evolved a lot from the automobile and being able to be more independent. The courtship process rapidly evolved into dating. In earlier times, young boys and girls spent their first dates at home, teenagers were given privacy, and a sexual revolution swept America. Experimentation with sexual behaviors before marriage became increasingly common. Young Americans were now able to look beyond their own small towns at an enlarged dating pool. So teenagers now have a place to gather, to socialize, to learn. They've built the foundations of youth culture, and now it's become a full-fledged identity that represents freedom and rebellion and consumerism. There's actually a book called Advertising and Marketing for Youth, where American teenagers are considered the new jackpot market. And although this is based in American culture and history, even in England we start to see these youth-led subcultures like Teds, who were kind of Elvis-like. They wore quiffs and had flick knives, and they were a part of the working class of London circa 1953. Then we had the mods, skinheads, and punks. The 1950s were marked by the emergence of a distinct teen culture. Seeking to distance themselves from the culture of their parents, teenagers turned to rock and roll music and youth-oriented television programs and movies, all packaged for them through new marketing strategies targeting their demographic. It's interesting to see the difference in the teen youth subcultures that were emerging in the 50s compared to teen subcultures now, because they're definitely not as distinct or prominent as they used to be. I think the closest that teens have to these kinds of subcultures are like aesthetics, like, oh, you're a cottagecore, you're an e-girl, or you're Barbie-core, or you're this or that. And there was like a real sense of community and identity in these 1950s subcultures that you don't really see with these aesthetics today, because they're just aesthetics. It doesn't really have anything to do with lifestyle or community. Fashion historian Shelby Ivy Christie pinpoints the shift to one thing. It's that algorithm, she says. It's wanting to belong and be positioned as cool. It's fed to tweens. I think also now with the rise of these cores, they are not just pressured into choices, they're almost over pressured into identity. You have to belong to a core. What is your aesthetic? Who are you? I think a lot of teens are just a cog in a bigger wheel. That want and pressure to belong to a specific aesthetic also serves the needs of retailers, brands, and ads without them even realizing it. I want to talk about the kind of evolution of teen film and TV because it wasn't really until the 1930s and 40s where we started to see more teenage representation in film and TV, and we've seen a great array of teen media throughout the years, and it's extremely influential on youth culture. Movies personified above all by the bizarre boy man Mickey Rooney and the Andy movies he began to make in 1937. His frequent co-star Judy Garland was part of the phenomenon too. As Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, Garland was clearly a woman, not the girl everyone pretended she was. The tension between the maturity she feels and the childishness others see in her helps make the film more than a children's fantasy. It is an early piquant expression of the predicament of the teenager. The earliest teen films we see are movies like Rebel Without a Cause, I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, I Was a Teenage Werewolf, Teenager from Outer Space, and Teenage Doll, which I'm obsessed with these names. That could be core in itself. Frankenstein core, Teen Werewolf core, Teenage Doll core. That's basically Barbie core, is it not? But where we really start to see the massive influence of youth culture and teenagehood on TV and film is in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, once Fox became a major network. MTV is like, I think, the peak of teen media. I mean, that was the hub for pop culture and for teen culture. Then we had iconic teen films that still hold up today, like The Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink, 16 Candles, TV shows like The Facts of Life, Different Strokes. Then moving into the 90s, we had shows like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, My So-Called Life, 90210, Daria, Buffy, Moesha, Freaks and Geeks. Early 2000s, there was One Tree Hill, Dawson's Creek, Gilmore Girls, Gossip Girl. Even award shows like the VMAs had such an iconic place in pop culture that we don't really see today. I mean, the VMAs are still going on, but I think the early 2000s era of the VMAs was just so iconic and is unmatched, and today's VMAs can't live up to that level of popularity. But the reason that is because, you know, the nature of television has changed so much with streaming and social media. I mean, back then, everybody was gathering around their TV at the same time to watch this event, and you would watch it with your friends and your families, and, you know, you would sit down in front of your TV to watch a music video debut on MTV, or you would watch your favorite pop star win a Moon Man and, you know, deliver a stellar, iconic performance that would define their career, then go to school the next day and talk about it with your friends and your teachers, and because everybody was watching it. It was communal, it was universal, it was just special. Award shows just aren't what they used to be, and teen TV shows definitely are not what they used to be. I'd say the most popular teen TV show these days is Euphoria. Euphoria was a huge moment in pop culture for Gen Z. And then there were Skins, which came a few years before. But I don't really see the same kinds of TV shows that we were getting in the early 2000s and even the 90s. Because Euphoria, I mean, if you've seen it, you know it's a very heavy show. It's quite adult, honestly. And although, sure, Euphoria depicts realities for a lot of teenagers in America, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a universal experience, and it touches on very dark subjects, and we don't really get shows like Sabrina the Teenage Witch anymore. But I think that makes sense considering the way, you know, teens interact with media today. Things are a lot more heavier and darker and more adult. And I think Euphoria kind of represents that change of, you know, teen media being more adultified rather than holding on to a sense of youth and playfulness. You know, everyone's watching the same shows on streaming now, so there aren't dedicated teen networks for kids to watch relatable teen life content. And the last part of the teen media section I want to talk about is magazines, because magazines definitely have played a huge part in teen media and totally hopped on to the rise of the teenager very early on. 17 magazine being the first teen magazine to emerge in, I believe, the 1940s. And then, of course, we have Teen Magazine, Cosmo Girl, Teen Vogue, J14. I used to buy J14 as a kid and collect all of the celebrity posters. I miss those days. Do people still buy teen magazines? Like that's, I mean, people don't really buy magazines in general anymore, but I mean, are the 11-year-olds of today buying J14 and hanging up like, I don't know, Olivia Rodrigo posters in their bedroom? Now I want to talk about teen clothing brands, because where are they? Where have they gone? Where did kids shop? Like there used to be Justice, which is more of like a tween, like older child store, but still teen tween nonetheless. Delia's, Wet Seal, Claire's, Abercrombie & Fitch, Hot Topic, Spencer's, all of these stores have kind of gone out of style. I mean, I know people still shop at like PacSun and stuff, but you know, most teens these days shop at like Lululemon or H&M or Shein. 57% of teens cite Amazon as their #1 favorite e-commerce site, with Nike, Shein, Lululemon, and PacSun taking spots 2 through 5. I think the main reason why we don't see teen-oriented clothing stores anymore is because of the decline of shopping malls. You know, like most of the stores I mentioned, like Abercrombie, Hollister, Justice, etc., were usually in shopping malls, and most people shop online, like on Amazon for clothing. And I also think with the rise of TikTok and the way that TikTok has shifted the trend cycles for fashion, teenagers are more interested in following online clothing trends that most young adults are wearing and following. Justice is with Walmart now, but we don't really see a lot of tween fashion brands anymore, trend forecaster Catherine Irving says. I think that the teen market in general is such a tough transitional phase for kids, and stores are still finding it hard to navigate. The other thing is that customers are moving in and out quickly through the tween range that you're constantly doing customer acquisition. So it's just a little bit of a tricky area in the market. The tween market especially, I think, has like kind of disappeared. I mean, I'm also in my 20s, so I'm not talking to people below the age of like 21 ever, so I don't really know what the scene is like for the kids 10 to 14, but Justice's original intended age market was between 6 to 14, but most girls who shop at Justice are around 10 years old. I think kids, especially now more than ever, just want to dress older and, you know, dress like their favorite influencers, so stores like Justice aren't incredibly appealing to them. But you know, if there's any 6 to 14 year olds out there watching this video, let me know. What are y'all wearing? The unwavering thought now is, who is the tween girl and what does she like? Because it's no longer glitter graphic tees with positive affirmations across the chest, nor is it something radically adult. The in-between and constant fluctuation of self is what has young people abandoning these staple stores, and hence tween brands precipitously declining. Cottagecore, Barbiecore, Mermaidcore, Preppycore, all these cores circulate on TikTok, giving impressionable teens a one-size-fits-all approach to style. When you're submerging yourself into the retail world as your own person for the first time, it can be the needed guidance to find individuality or affirmation from the masses. I think that's interesting because when I was in like the Justice age range of like 6 to 14, I feel like for the most part, we all dressed the same. I would say once I hit like 12, 13, I started to find my own style and I was like super emo. But for the most part, there weren't so many options. There weren't so many different aesthetics to choose from. There was like a handful of them. Yeah, people dress preppy. Like maybe you'd shop at like, what's that store with the pink whale? Vineyard Vines, or you shopped at Hot Topic like me, or you went to Abercrombie & Fitch. But I don't remember feeling the same pressure of trying to find an aesthetic or a core to identify with, and it wasn't like shoved down our throats back then as it is now with TikTok and everything. There's so many niche cores, niche aesthetics that I'm sure is overwhelming for young kids to try to choose because you don't even know who you are, so you're just trying on all these different identities trying to see what fits, which I think is like natural in general. With brands notably known for targeting more mature clientele becoming the staple shopping points for the younger crowd, the question arises, will preteen fashion eventually die out? Will this homogenous fashion movement become the norm? And will it be customary for a 12 and 24-year-old to roam the same aisles? My question exactly, which is kind of scary to think about, but I think that's accurate. I think it's true. That's kind of the reality of it. So speaking of shopping malls, I want to talk about third spaces because I think the lack of third spaces is a real issue for everybody, but especially for teenagers. So third spaces are the social surroundings that are separate from the two usual social environments of home, first place, and the workplace, second place. Examples of third places include churches, cafes, clubs, public libraries, gyms, bookstores, stoops, and parks. Do you guys remember that show 16? It was like an animated TV show on like Teen Nick or something, and it literally is about teenagers hanging out in a mall. And like that concept I feel like is dead. Like that's not a thing anymore. I remember when I was in middle school, we would go to this place called like the Rio, and it was basically just a bunch of stores, and there was like a pier and like a movie theater, and just like people would literally go there on Friday nights. Like middle schoolers like myself would go in their best Abercrombie fit and roam around with their friends, just living off the land. And it was great, and we didn't have to spend money, and we just had ourselves and our imagination. And I don't know if kids have that anymore, or if they feel a desire to do that anymore. Like obviously shopping centers are still a thing, but I wonder if social media has stopped kids from going to third spaces to socialize and interact with each other and meet other kids their age. Kids need third spaces so they can do that, you know, places where they don't have to spend money or have to focus on education or learning, but just have time to also have to think about what is the structure we are creating for them so that they are able to learn how to socialize and be social without being gatekept. I think the internet and social media has really served as a replacement for third spaces, especially now that shopping malls have greatly declined since the rise of online shopping. Teenagers aren't reading as much either, and so I doubt they're like hanging out at libraries. Not that, if you're going to the library with your friends, you're like there to read, but I don't know. I just feel like places where teens used to hang out aren't really popular anymore, or places where teens today would think, oh yeah, we should go here. But again, I'm not a teenager, so I'm a little like tone deaf in that regard. And not to mention the fact that, if you want to socialize with your friends, you can do it online. And I think a lot of people, especially younger people, see socializing online as like the first resort when it comes to interaction with friends. I have to double check this, but I'm pretty sure this generation of teenagers is at a record low when it comes to sexual activity and having a driver's license. And so I think that just proves that kids really aren't going out. They're not going places. They're not doing a lot of the things that teens of the past used to do. Like sexual exploration isn't as popular, and I think a lot of that has to do with like general anxiety and insecurity. And of course I'm blaming it on social media, because like if you're a teenager and you're comparing yourself to like a 24-year-old influencer, and that's like what you're seeing all day, and that's the norm when it comes to what's beautiful and what's aspirational, that'll really warp your self-perception. Like magazines were a thing, of course, and teenagers were comparing themselves to models in magazines, but social media has really infiltrated, I think, what is considered to be normal. And like so many teenagers are looking older these days because, they have access to YouTube and TikTok, and they can, watch these tutorials on how to beat their face, and they can learn how to dress like adult women, and they're shopping at the same places as adult women. And so they're almost, I feel like there's like a sense of like competition to be like, oh, I have to look like this grown-ass lady to be considered beautiful. I think the anxiety that is bred from social media use has caused kids to stay home and to not want to interact and be vulnerable with each other. Social media is such a distraction too. I mean, teens were just sucking and fucking back then because there was nothing better to do. But now you can, I don't know, scroll on TikTok and play Candy Crush. No one plays Candy Crush anymore. What am I saying? Third places, public settings, which offer sociability and community connection, may foster adaptive responding through the mutually consecutive, mutually reinforcing, and interrelated mechanisms of psychological sense of community and social capital. That is so important. Like, kids need that. Kids need third spaces for psychological and social development. It's a huge core part of the teenage experience, so they learn how to socialize. And I really think that teenagers today are suffering when it comes to the skill of socializing and making friends. Adults suffer from this too. Making friends is so hard. But I do worry for the younger generation that their social skills will be inept and they will be underdeveloped. And I can't imagine what it'll look like when they're in college and when they're in their 20s. And I'm afraid that teens will just never go outside and they'll never get out of their comfort zone and break these barriers of social anxiety, and it'll only just get worse. So yeah, if you're a teenager, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this, or if you're an adult and you want to give your own experience about what it was like being a teenager before TikTok and Instagram and all this stuff. I'd love to know your thoughts. So yeah, is teenhood and tweenhood dead? Is it on the decline? Is it extinct? Will there be a shift back to teen-oriented media and spaces? I hope so, but only time will tell. And hopefully maybe this gap will be filled by some entrepreneurial Gen Zer. Who knows? But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!